Even Star Wars knows the Jedi should avoid one of the Force's iconic powers. Warning: contains spoilers for Star Wars. Jedi Knights Number 1. The Jedi are incredibly powerful warriors in the Star Wars universe, with a number of abilities that elevate them beyond practically any other fighter. But the thing about the Jedi is that they are supposed to be more than just great warriors, but also peacekeepers. They are duty-bound to use their Force abilities for good. And now, one particular Jedi power is finally being called out for its decidedly dark nature, as even Star Wars knows the Jedi should be above this iconic ability. In a preview for Star Wars, Jedi Knights Number 1 by Mark Guggenheim and Madibek Musabekov, the Jedi of the Star Wars prequel era, before the events of The Phantom Menace, are working to broker peace between two warring civilizations. While the likes of Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was still a Padawan at that time, fought on the front lines of this conflict to mitigate the loss of life, Qui-Gon Jinn and a Jedi named Burem Kana spoke with one of the leaders, hoping to convince him to call for a ceasefire. When it became clear that diplomacy wasn't working, Burem Kana took it upon himself to end the conflict right then and there, or at least try to. Kana tried to use the Jedi mind trick to force this warlord to pull back his armies. Of course, the Jedi mind trick only works on the weak-minded, and his mind was strong enough to repel it. But even before Kana attempted the Jedi mind trick, Qui-Gon tried to stop him, as he knew it was the wrong thing to do, especially if it worked. Jedi should not impose their will over others, and Star Wars is finally acknowledging that. The Jedi mind trick has always been wrong. This scene highlights how wrong the Jedi mind trick is, and quite frankly, has always been. Qui-Gon didn't try to stop Burem because he knew the mind trick would fail, though that was definitely a part of it. He tried to stop him in case it worked. The Jedi were there to broker peace, not enforce their will. If the mind trick worked, all that would happen would be a temporary ceasefire followed by the immediate distrust of the Jedi, which would make achieving peace in this matter impossible. Plus, the Jedi are taught patience through the Force, and this particularly frustrating meeting was a practice in patience. The Jedi needed to find a peaceful way to resolve the conflict, no matter how long it took or how frustrating it was. Burem trying to use the Jedi mind trick to force peace showed his lack of patience, and it was unbecoming of a Jedi Knight. Also, the very act of bending others to one's will is a scythe practice, and completely goes against the ways of the Jedi, which means the Jedi mind trick has always been wrong. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the only Jedi who used the Jedi mind trick properly. Obi-Wan used the Force power not to impose his will, but to stay invisible. The only Jedi who used the Jedi mind trick in a morally upstanding way was Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, with the iconic line, "These are not the droids you're looking for." Obi-Wan used the Jedi mind trick not to impose his will. He used it as something of an invisibility trick. He didn't force the stormtrooper to do something he didn't want to do, like even Qui-Gon himself tried to do to Watto in The Phantom Menace. He simply kept himself and those with him invisible, which doesn't seem wrong in the slightest. After 42 years, an iconic return of the Jedi fight returns, but this time with a shock replacement for Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker fought a number of battles in Return of the Jedi, and Star Wars is about to recreate one of them with a shocking replacement for Luke. While Obi-Wan Kenobi is a clear exception, the entire practice of Jedi mind tricks feels like it shouldn't be in the Jedi's arsenal at all, and this Star Wars preview is a perfect example. A Jedi may feel tempted to impose their will over others, which is decidedly not the Jedi way. So despite the fact that it's a Force power that's been around since the very beginning of the franchise, even Star Wars knows the Jedi mind trick should be avoided. Mark Hamill, James Earl Jones, David Prowse, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, Ian McDiarmid, Ewan McGregor, Rosario Dawson, Lars Mikkelsen, Rupert Friend, Moses Ingram, Frank Oz, Pedro Pascal. TV shows: The Mandalorian and/or Obi-Wan Kenobi, The Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, The Acolyte, Star Wars, Skeleton Crew, Lando, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars. The Bad Batch, Star Wars. Resistance, Star Wars. Young Jedi Adventures, Star Wars. Vision.